Hello there guys, RMP792 here. Yeah, I'm not doing this one with Jake. Or drunk. As the problem is, because he lives a good sort of 30-40 minute drive away, it's very much a case of when we can actually be bothered to organise going around his and things like that. So, terribly sorry if you were hoping to see more drunken analysis of Star Trek Discovery, but I am going to talk about Episode 3. So, I am also going to go into massive spoilers, so yeah. So, Episode 3 was good. I still maintain my statement from the previous one in that it's bringing up all sorts of horrible continuity problems, most of which go away if they'd set it after the end of Voyager and made this race who are the Klingons a completely different race. But anyway, massive spoilers. I will make that clear. So if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. So things I liked about the episode. Jason Isaacs seems like a very different kind of captain than we've seen before. In particular, okay, I'll go through it in a semi sort of chronological order again. So it starts off with Michael on a prison transport shuttle, and they're flying through some sort of, I don't know, critters that are sticking to the outside of the hull. So the pilot goes out to deal with it, and it's we'll be fine as long as the pilot's okay. Pilot goes drifting off into space, presumably dead. Well, that's a grim opening, dudes. And then they get rescued by the Discovery, and nope, don't like the Discovery's design terribly much. Now, granted, I didn't really like the design of the Enterprise D, so the one from Next Generation when I first saw it, but it eventually kind of grew on me, but I still maintain the D is not a good-looking ship. So we have precedent for not particularly good-looking Starfleet ships in Star Trek as the main ship of the series. I mean, the best-looking Starfleet vessel is still the E, the Sovereign-class ship, but anywho. But yes, I'm not a massive fan of the Discovery's design. I have no idea how large she's supposed to be. The captain mentions that they have over 300 different effectively science labs that can be used for discrete research completely independent of one another. Which, given that the original Enterprise only had a crew of about 400, that implies Discovery is bigger than the Enterprise. Which I'm not necessarily averse to, but I would like some vague clarification of roughly how big the crew is. Give me an offhand line at some point in the next couple of episodes and I'll be fine. Because the Enterprise D has a crew of somewhere in the region of 1,000. Again, they throw these numbers out as kind of vague. Here's roughly what it is. And you can cram a lot more people onto the D when you need to. Which is part of the point. It is capable of being used as an evacuation ship in an emergency, and you can cram a reasonable number of people onto it for short periods. But so the Discovery itself looks squashed for a Federation ship, I think is the best way to describe it. Because, the nacelles are actually sort of slightly downwards, and the actual rise to the saucer section of the sort of neck joint is pretty short for a Federation starship, so it looks compressed, I think is the best way to describe it. They also mentioned 8,000, was it 8,000 people getting killed at the Battle of the Battle of the Two Stars, or whatever it was called. That's a lot for a Federation fleet of that size in that time period. When they first mentioned 8,000 people getting killed, they were talking about the destruction of the Europa. Europa? I think it was the Europa. The Admiral's flagship. And at first I thought they were implying that 8,000 people got killed aboard that ship, which is impressive given that Miranda-class ships are smaller than Constitution-class ships and have smaller crews. Because I think it looked like a Miranda-class ship, but I didn't get enough of a close look at it to be able to tell for certain. And again, all of this can be mitigated if you say it's the future and they're building bigger ships with bigger crews, but so yes, anyway, so after she gets brought on board, she gets led out by the security chief, who appears to have a stick firmly inserted up her anus. and that ain't budging anytime soon, I suspect. But yeah, so she gets led to the mess hall where they sort of let her fellow prisoners try and beat the bejesus out of her. I'm still not entirely sure why they tried to do that, but fair enough. And to be fair, she proved she could take Adam Jensen in a fight. If you're not aware, one of the guys who was playing the convict is the same guy who voices Adam Jensen in the Deus Ex series. So. Can't remember the actor's name, but he also turned up in The Expanse. And, he's a perfectly fine actor. I have no problem with him being in this. It's just one of those things that he's got a voice that's just recognisable enough for me to constantly think, dude, break out your cyborg arms, then you can win. But anyway, classic problem with actors, who have sort of one memorable role. But anywho, then after she demonstrates her knowledge of some Vulcan martial arts, and then the security chief is a bit kind of snippy about it, basically implying that they're not very good. Which, to be fair, Vulcans do actually have pretty decent martial arts, but you've got to keep in mind that Vulcans have 2.5, 3 times the average strength of an average human. So, they don't need quite as much technique in their martial arts to put the other guy down properly. Let's face it, it's not that difficult for a well-trained human to kill another human using only, hands, fists, whatever. So, the fact she didn't kill him was actually showing restraint. But yes, anywho, so then we meet the captain for the first time, and he basically explains that, he has to have the lights in his office sort of go up and down slowly, because he got injured in combat, and his eyes got partially damaged, and he wanted to hang on to the originals rather than get any kind of cybernetic replacements. Continuity problem, once again, they don't have cybernetic replacements at this point in the timeline. Because Geordi's visor is meant to be effectively a very early prototype of something that works along the same principles. It's more difficult for them with Geordi because he was born blind than it is to do something similar for somebody who's lost their sight. But Geordi doesn't get artificial eyes until in First Contact. I think it's the first time he's got them. Yeah, it is. So First Contact is the first time that Geordi has his artificial eyes rather than his visor. So the mention that they have technology for artificial eyes feels off. Ongoing problem. This is going to be the problem I'm going to be bringing up constantly, because other than that, I'm enjoying the show so far. If you can ignore the continuity problems, if you've never seen Star Trek or you don't care at all about continuity, this is a good, enjoyable show. If you have seen Star Trek and you are like me and continuity problems bug the bejesus out of you, this is going to annoy you, is the best way to describe it. This feels like a Star Trek show for people who've never watched Star Trek before, which, okay, but at the same time, loyal fan base. Anyway, he also has a Tribble on his desk. There was one theory that I spotted that somebody put up online that I think actually explains perfectly why he's got a Tribble. Tribbles don't like Klingons. At all. And we know from TOS that the Klingons were willing to surgically alter their people to make them look more human so that they could be used as infiltrators. Except that, surgical alteration doesn't fool a Tribble. It freaks the hell out if it gets near a Klingon. So that's the theory about why he's got a Tribble on his desk, is in case anybody turns up who's actually secretly a Klingon spy. Okay, it's probably just meant to be there as a cute callback. But it, as I say, it's always one of those things that when fans have to go, oh, this is probably why, or maybe this is an explanation, and the creator's just like, no, it's just a cute callback, but can't tell. So he basically says while the shuttle's being fixed, he's going to assign her to one of the research teams because they're doing some important work. So she goes down and she meets her new bunkmate, who is, oh Jesus Christ. You'd think if any show could avoid the massive nerd stereotypes, it would be Star Trek. But no, we have a massive nerd who's twitchy and trying to prove everything and really really nervous and. Anywho, moving on. So she gets introduced to the sort of the scientist. I forgot to mention that Officer Doug Jones is back and he's now first officer. So nice to see him. We knew he was going to be a main character, and she also spots the redhead from the Xinjiao, who's now got a sort of cybernetic thing here, which is presumably due to injuries sustained on the Xinjiao or sometime after. Again, there's far too many cybernetics in this show because Starfleet doesn't have that many cybernetics. Certainly not at this point in the timeline. There's also a lot of aliens on the crew, which I sort of like from the concept of Starfleet is meant to be this big multi-planet federation with lots and lots of different members. The problem is that the Klingon exclusively meant, when he was talking about the races involved in the Federation, he talked about the humans, the Vulcans, the Andorians, and the Tellarites, i.e. the four founding groups. They were the basis for the Federation. Now, it's entirely possible that they've expanded out and got some new members since then. But, who can say? Also, I'm pretty sure were the Denobulans in there or not? The problem with the Denobulans, of course, was they were introduced in Enterprise and they were never ever seen in any of the other shows. Again, that's always the problem when you do prequels. There's another fan theory going around that the reason we never see a Denobulan again is because the Borg found out that they could resist assimilation and just decided, screw it, we're not risking that, and just wiped them out. Probably with some sort of plague from very, very far away without them ever knowing what happened to them because, that's how the Borg would do it. They're efficient. Kill them in the most efficient way possible, and if you're trying to do it without leaving fingerprints, do it with a bioweapon. Simple. But anyway, so they're working on a thing, and her attitude is, well, this thing looks weird. It's combining physics and biology. That's not that weird. Medical physics is an entire... I know several physicists from my old university who took medical physics modules. So combining the two is not at all unusual. I mean, there is a lovely line which is, what's it? Sociology is applied psychology, psychology is applied biology, biology is applied chemistry, chemistry is applied physics, and physics is applied maths. It's all linked, it's all interconnected, and it all stems from the same place and it goes to the same place. Which is completely accurate. Science, we like to break it up into discrete categories, but there's so much overflow and so much overlap between them that it's kind of a pointless exercise breaking them up for any reason beyond, trying to focus ourselves. And because humans just do not have the mental capacity to know everything, breaking them up like that into discrete sections makes sense for us. But from a universe point of view, there is no difference. But anyway, so they're working on some sort of weird thing involving some sort of spores. So she breaks into the lab, which, the second she did that, I was just sitting there going, well, the captain's testing her. Because frankly, given that the door wasn't locked, even though she was meant to be confined to quarters, now granted her colleague needed to get out, but given that the computer can clearly identify different people, even through something as simple as voice print, letting her roommate in and out while also keeping her locked in wouldn't be that hard. Provided that they trusted the roommate to actually, stay there. And they didn't have evidence of the breath scanner, on any door beyond the one in the lab. But so, there's no implication that she used it anywhere before then. But anywho. So she goes in and she finds some weird spore things. And I'll freely admit, when I first looked at that, my comment was, is that Genesis? Because that looks a lot like Genesis. If you've never seen Wrath of Khan, the Genesis torpedo basically creates life. Specifically, you shoot it at a lifeless rock, and it gets coated in trees, forests, water. It basically it's instant terraforming, just add water. The downside is if you shoot it onto a planet that's already got life on it, it will completely destroy that life to create the new life. So it's potentially a weapon of mass destruction, which is why research into it basically gets banned later, because it is too dangerous. Sorry, itchy neck. So my first thought was that it was Genesis, because it looked kind of Genesis-y, but turns out it wasn't. They then get a message from their sister ship, the Glenn. The Discovery and the Glenn. Normally when Starfleet has sister ships, there is a sort of commonality to their names, but not always, so... Doesn't matter. Anywho. There's been some sort of accident aboard the Glenn and everybody is dead, including the research partner of the sort of head scientist, which, honestly, his scenes are actually legitimately the most interesting part of the episode, where you realise, he's a scientist. He's in it for the love of the science. He only wants to do something that nobody's ever done before, and he's not happy that his work is getting co-opted by, effectively, the military. Which is very much the attitude that Carol Marcus has in Wrath of Khan. Because that's always been kind of Starfleet's duality. They are at once a civilian scientific organisation and a military. And I'm one of the people who basically says, yes, Starfleet is a military. Because they have weapons, their ships have weapons, they have military ranks. If they get kicked out, it's referred to as a court-martial, which literally refers to a military court. So, yeah, anyone who tries to claim Starfleet isn't military is kidding themselves. They're just they're a different kind of military, based on the fact that, well, humans are smug bastards in the future and have convinced themselves they don't need one. Though somebody practical has clearly said, hang on a minute. So, yes. So that's... Yeah, he's got some legitimately good moments. So they take a shuttle to the Glenn. A warp-capable shuttle. Once again, tech they shouldn't have for another 100 years. So they land on the Glenn, and they're just like, well, everybody's been killed horribly. This is more graphic than I was expecting on Star Trek. Seriously, this is a lot more graphic than I was expecting on Star Trek, with people kind of rendered into mulch, and sort of squished into helical designs almost, with sort of ribs poking out and stuff like that, which, yeah, okay, wasn't expecting that. It's pretty dark, actually. I mean, this was a grim sequence. And they find a bunch of dead Klingons as well, and it's the, oh look, a bat'leth. That is not a bat'leth. But anyway, and then there's one more Klingon who's still alive who sort of shushes them, and I'm just thinking, okay, why would that particular gesture have translated across cultures? Unless he knows what it is. Oh, well, maybe he'll explain it. Oh, he's dead. Okay. So they're fighting a gene stealer. That's what it reminded me of. I mean, okay, yes, granted. If it was an actual gene stealer, they'd all be very, 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 very dead. But, resistant to phasers. Smashes through bulkheads with little or no effort. Cuts things in half quite comfortably, horribly murderous. It's a gene stealer. My first sort of thought was, they've made a xenomorph, haven't they? As in the creatures from Alien, but no, I'm going with gene stealer as my comparison. But yes, and as they're sprinting away, my comment is, well, the red shirt's going to die. To which the comment is, which red? Was there a red shirt? Yeah, there's a guy with a backpack who's had like one or two moments when he's actually been on camera. He's going to die. Oh, yeah, maybe. And then he does. Which was entirely predictable. I'll be honest, I don't like the gold, silver, and bronze colour scheme. It's what's with all the silver shirts? Must be a science vessel. What was wrong with blue? Yeah, I'll be honest, the captain's uniforms or the senior officers' uniforms with the gold, with the the blue and the gold piping, that looks really good. But the silver and the bronze just don't differentiate themselves enough for easy identification. So if the security guys had red piping to go on the blue uniforms, and the science guys had a lighter shade of blue or something like that, maybe. But yeah, no, I'm not a fan of these uniforms. As I say, the captain's variant or the senior officer's variant looks good. The rest of them just don't work. Is ultimately the problem I have there. So yes, anyway, so they get themselves into one of the science labs, and and the security chief is basically phasering her way out the room, with the beam, and they've got some sort of device that was there that they're going to pilfer. And Michael basically decides, okay, I need to lead this creature away and limit its movement, and the best way to do that is to basically, trick it into following her into a Jeffries tube, because it's quite large, so it has trouble scuttling through a small, enclosed space. That was sensible. That actually made a lot of sense. The fact that she started quoting Alice in Wonderland was a bit weird. One of the theories, again, that I've read online about that is that she's actually claustrophobic. Probably as a result of having to hide while her parents were getting killed and her outpost was getting bombed and what have you. So she might be a little bit claustrophobic. So she was basically using that to overcome her fear, in much the same way that in Dune they like using the fear as a mind killer routine. Which I'm kind of okay with if that's what they were doing. Otherwise, it was just kind of a weird, surrealist choice. And she basically then crawls through the ducting straight to the shuttle bay and just drops straight into the shuttle. Cool moment, and she yells "Go!" when they fly out. And my immediate comment was, "You idiots remember to close the top hatch, right?" Because there was no indication that hatch closed, other than them flying out into space and not dying. So I'll be charitable and assume they did. It was just so anyway, they toddle back to the Discovery, and Michael's comment is to the captain, you did this on purpose. This was all some sort of test, because you're clearly developing some sort of bioweapon, and you want the help of somebody who's intelligent, but obviously amoral if she would mutiny. And the captain then beams them to the science lab, which site-to-site transporters not a thing in TOS, for God's sake. And then he basically sort of says, it's not a weapon per se, it's a new means of propulsion. Something that basically allows them to travel instantly, using some sort of spores. And he sort of effectively beams her around the galaxy, which, okay, the fact that he's absolutely right. If you are in a war and you can travel massively quickly, as in blink in, fire off a load of torpedoes, blink out again before they can do anything, yeah, that's really useful in a war. And that would potentially allow them to win, while also not being overtly military tech. The ability to go faster is useful for just about everything. Whether that be civilian transport shipping, whether that be exploration vessels, whether that be military ships. Generally, the ability to go faster is just really useful in the grand scheme of things. But obviously, this tech's not going to work because they don't have it in the future, or something's going to go horribly wrong. One of the fan theories I've seen bouncing around is that they're accidentally going to transport themselves to the 25th century using this tech. So they're just going to go missing, and people will assume they've been killed in combat, and they're actually going to end up in the future. That's not going to happen. I seriously doubt that's going to happen at any rate. But yeah, it's pretty clear that there's something sinister going on here, because as they mentioned, black Starfleet badges, which they've never seen before. So the prevailing fan theory is that this is a Section 31 ship, or at the very least that the captain is Section 31. If you're not aware, Section 31 turned up in Deep Space Nine, and they are basically the covert military, covert, secret, ultra black ops organization of Starfleet, who their name basically comes from Article 14, Section 31 of the Starfleet Charter, which basically states that they can do anything that is necessary in times of extreme crisis. And Section 31's ethos is basically, there's always a crisis. They will do whatever is necessary to protect the Federation by all means, fair or foul. So this is a group that was quite happy to use bioweapons during the Dominion War to try and wipe out the Founders, and damn near succeeded. And they've done all sorts of very dodgy things over the years. We know that back in Enterprise there was an organization that existed that was referred to as a section, and the guy quoted Article 14, Section 31, which, and you're never entirely sure if that was Section 31, if that was just their predecessor, if that's what they were actually calling themselves at the time, or what. But that kind of worked as they've always been there, they're always going to be there, and they will do dodgy stuff if and when they have to. Especially with the ending scene where the captain has basically had the Gene Stealer beamed aboard the Discovery right before he blows up the Glen. And, dude, you might have been able to salvage that. I mean, I appreciate there's a war on, and towing stuff through warp's a massive pain in the neck, but was there any indication that the ship's warp drive was damaged? I'm genuinely uncertain. No? Okay. They didn't explicitly mention any damage to the warp drive, but I'll be charitable and assume that the ship was sufficiently damaged that they couldn't just send over a prize crew. Poor choice of words, because it's not really a prize if it's one of theirs, but send over a small skeleton crew. Admittedly, they'd probably have had nightmares based on all the corpses that they'd have had to clean up. But and then toddle it back to a Starfleet base rather than just blowing up this brand new swanky ship. But anywho, so the whole premise of this show is clearly a kind of we're going to do some dodgy stuff to win the war, which at the moment DS9 did better. They haven't come close to In the Pale Moonlight yet, but In the Pale Moonlight had the advantage of about 6 seasons of character development up to that point, so we really got to know the characters and what their limits were, so that we could bend them. So at the moment we're only 3 episodes in. I'm certainly willing to. I'm enjoying it. Significant continuity problems aside, and I'm genuinely curious to see where they go with it. It still doesn't really feel much like Star Trek, I've got to be honest. As I say, it feels like a Star Trek show for people who didn't really watch or like Star Trek. But no, I'm enjoying it. I'm curious to see where it goes. What they need to do at this point is remember that Star Trek shows work best when they're an ensemble. So they need to make sure we have some episodes that are dedicated to other members of the crew, so we can get to know them a little better. So I'd like to see a bit more of the redhead with the new cybernetic, because she's obviously going to have some issues with Michael, and that could lead to some interesting personal stuff. Maybe see some more of the security chief and get a bit of her backstory. Maybe some more of her roommate if she can be slightly less annoying. But yeah. As I said, there's a lot of places they could go with it. I'm curious to see what they do. But it's still a continuity nightmare, and I don't know how they're going to get around that at this point. So I'm going to do my best to have it stop bothering me, or I'm just going to have to wait until all the other Star Trek nerds just collectively get together and figure out how the hell any of this makes sense. Because we will find a way. We always do. We are Star Trek nerds. Continuity problems are there to be explained, not ignored. So, with that said, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in future videos. And yeah, I'm probably going to do one of these for basically every episode of Discovery, so buckle in, people.